As a permaculture designer, I've learned to expand my awareness to avoid design mistakes. As an urbanist, I live in and observe places with a massive lack of awareness. So in today's episode, I'll explore how limited awareness ruins designs, how expanded awareness creates great designs, how to expand your awareness, and how cities can expand awareness to create vibrant, thriving futures for all residents. Welcome to Edenicity, best practices for sustainably abundant cities. Here's how design fails with limited awareness. Henry Ford once said, if you ask people what they want, they will say faster horses. And this is how design fails with limited awareness. City designs based on local opinion polls are backward-looking. They miss huge threats and opportunities, such as large-scale economic, geographic, demographic, and climate trends, and design options that have been thoroughly proven elsewhere. Design starts with broad assessments, not polls. Polls are for starting discussions. For example, even I didn't know what a roundabout was until my 40s. It's the job of urban designers to be up to speed on what's going on in cities around the world, what solutions have been tried, which ones worked, and how they fit into the large-scale forces that are shaping the city. Then they can use polls to get a handle on how much of this the citizens know and begin a good faith conversation about change in that city. This is something that I rarely see. Usually the steps of looking at those large-scale forces and understanding solutions proven in other cities are almost an afterthought, well after the poll. So a huge opportunity is missed in many cities today. City designs based on local opinion polls also ignore deep history. Most Americans don't know how good mass transit was in most cities in America and still is elsewhere. It is a pernicious myth that the U.S. is too big for transit or that transit would never work here. It has worked in the past and could work again. Here's how design succeeds with expanded awareness. In 1965, shortly after independence, Singapore's citizens were 1/7 as wealthy as United States citizens. They had basically no natural resources and massive immigration. Most people lived in shanty towns with frequent fires and race riots. So the government instituted an economic policy that made housing a human right. The kompangs, or villages, in the shanty towns and squatter encampments resisted. So the city sent social workers in to find out what was going on and even brought in sociologists to try to understand the concerns and fears that the villagers might not even articulate or volunteer. It turned out that one of the keys was that villagers were afraid of getting stuck in elevators in the high-rises that the Housing Development Board was building. So since the 1970s, every elevator in Singapore has a software loop that checks the status of all its systems every 5 seconds and calls for help instantly if there's a problem. Over the years, Singapore built well over 1 million public housing units, which today are very high amenity, basically luxury. And Singapore now has a 91% home ownership rate versus 66% in the US, and 108% of the United States per capita GDP. I put my sources for those figures in the description, and you can read a lot more about how Singapore completely turned things around in such a short time in my book, Housing in 4 Cities, available through the link in the description below. While you're there, if you see a big white subscribe button, be sure to click that so you don't miss future episodes. And of course, I always appreciate people clicking that thumbs up button. Okay, now that I've made the case that expanding awareness is good and that design can succeed amazingly well with expanded awareness, the question you might be wondering is, well, how do I expand my awareness? Here are the steps. First, you want to recognize all the stakeholders in the design. And this can be not just people, but also every living thing in the landscape, and even the landscape itself, which is a conduit for nutrients and water to other ecosystems. So if just look at the drainage from a property, there can be stakeholders well away from the property that are affected by your decisions. Next, you want to recognize your bias. This is really hard to do. It takes practice. Many religions, many mindfulness traditions have a practice of gratitude and forgiveness every day, and both of those are very helpful in slowly starting to recognize your own biases and learning to, at least temporarily, let go of them so you can do your job as a designer. Next, you want to observe and feel what's going on around you dispassionately. What I mean by that is this is the moment where you don't bring your biases into the picture. You don't say, oh, that's a weed, we need to take it out. We don't have enough big flowers here. We need to put more big flowers here because that would be nice. You have to look at how the environment is functioning and look at what the intentions are of all of your stakeholders and put those together in a way that works in that time and place and going forward in time as well. You need to understand the motives or intentions, of course, of all the stakeholders. And most importantly, as you encounter problems, which is inevitable as a designer, learn to reframe them as solutions. An example that I've talked about in another episode is in Bloomington, Indiana, when I was taking my first of 2 permaculture design certificate courses. The final project was a redesign of the Green Acres neighborhood adjacent to Indiana University. When we walked the neighborhood and talked with residents, almost all of them complained about student noise and student trash, basically student disruption, from the many parties that the students threw and from the carelessness that the students had toward the neighborhood. But in this process of expanding our awareness, my project mates and I asked the question, if the students are the problem, how can they be the solution? And it gradually became clear that, well, the students brought a lot of energy to the neighborhood. What if that energy became aligned with the purposes of having a more sustainable neighborhood? And so our strategy going forward, and we actually did this with the neighborhood in real life, was to brand the neighborhood as a green neighborhood and partner with the university. And I've given quite a bit more detail on that in this episode here. With these lessons in mind, cities can be convenient yet safe, affordable and healthy for people and the planet, vibrant yet green and tranquil. How can they do this? Through awareness of the big forces that shape cities. These are trends in ecology and resources, including things like climate change, migrations and labor, capital and technology, and culture and art. It's this sort of expanded awareness that we need to bring to Edenicity so that earth-healing, more convenient, more abundant cities can become places where people prefer to live. To see how it all fits together, have a look at the reference design linked in the description below. And this is the previous video in the current design series, and the next video will appear below when it's ready next week. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay green, see you next time.